You're a businessman on the road and you've got to get a contract back to your office right away. What do? Well, you can use an overnight mail service, you can pay the hotel to use their fax machine, or if you have an add-in fax card and a laptop, you can do it yourself. Today we're going to show you how to turn your personal computer into a fax machine on this edition of the Computer Chronicles.
The Computer Chronicles is made possible in part by McGraw-Hill, publishers of Byte magazine, and Bix, the Byte Information Exchange. In print and online, Byte and Bix serve computer professionals worldwide with detailed information on new hardware, software, and technologies.
Welcome to the Computer Chronicles. I'm Stewart Cheifet, and this is Gary Kildall. And Gary, this is the hottest piece of office equipment around. It's not an answering machine. It's not a copy machine. It is, of course, a fax machine. What's your fax number? Right? That's the question everybody asks these days. But what's interesting, Gary, this is also a fax machine. If you have a personal computer, you can plug it in and add on board, and you've got a fax too. The mystery to me about fax machines is I was using this thing, not this thing, but a fax machine 20 years ago. It's not new technology. What's the big deal?
well, Stu, I wasn't using a fax machine 20 years ago, so I don't
right?
really know. I'm not too young for it. But I know that I'm using it now, and I think it's one of the greatest communication devices around. You can send text, you can send graphics, you can do it almost instantly, anywhere in the world. In my own personal use of it, what I do is I just pick up my messages at the end of the day and go through them, rip it off, and one by one, and then respond to them. And so you get a really nice communication center. And of course, the price is really right. And it turns out if you're in business nowadays and don't have a fax number, you're sort of considered an outsider.
That's right. Well, we're going to help you solve that problem by looking at fax boards for your personal computer. We'll take a look at a lot of the ones that are on the market and help you decide which one is right for you. Now, fax boards are generally a lot less expensive than full-blown fax machines, but the users think they're also better. And we found an expert who agrees. Here's a report.
When author John Heilborn heard about the personal facsimile, or fax machine, he thought he had discovered the ideal way to transmit documents to his many publishers. It was fast, accurate, and available day or night. What he didn't count on was how easily available it was to anyone who obtained his telephone number.
5 months ago, I started getting junk fax. I came in one morning and there was 10 feet of junk mail in my fax machine. I'd thrown away $10 worth of paper for nothing, and that made me angry. So I started to not have my fax machine on, and that was a problem because people who wanted to send me things overnight couldn't do it. And so I always had to be there to monitor what was coming in if it was junk.
John's solution was to install a fax card in his personal computer. The card transmits and receives like a standalone machine, but has the added advantage of storing messages in disk files, with the option of printing at a later date. John can compose a document and tell the program to send it to a list of editors at a more convenient time, or examine messages received earlier to decide if they're worth keeping. He can hop back and forth between word processor and fax program. And if a message arrives while he's using his PC, he gets a warning on the screen. In some ways, it's almost too efficient.
One problem I could see is that, someone might offer me something wonderful. I'll sign a contract, and the next day someone would offer me something even better, And had it been done by mail, I'd have had that extra day to think about it. Specifically, the fax board provides you with enormous power because the computer has total control over the images that are being sent and received.
Joining us in the studio now is Joyce Lemons. She's product manager with Quadrum, and they make the JT Fax. Next to Joyce is Joel Borden, product manager with the Complete PC, makers of the Complete Fax. And Gary over there is a real fax machine, and we'll talk to it in just a moment.
Over here we have no real fax machines.
Well, we'll see.
Okay. Now, what we do have is an IBM PC compatible here, and there's, I think, one located underneath the table. Joel, you have a board here that takes some of the fax functions and puts them into the IBM PC environment called the Complete PC, I believe. And would you tell us a little bit about what you've factored out and put on the board so far?
Absolutely. This board is known as the Complete Fax. The single most important component which we've put on is the facsimile modem. Okay. This allows it to talk to any Group 3 fax machine anywhere else. The telephone interface, of course, is how it gets to talk to those fax machines. That's important. An onboard microprocessor, which lets it run in background so that it can continue to do its work while you do your work. And finally, the PC bus interface, so that we can control it through software and use the PC's power supply.
Okay, so the important point is that this board can be installed in the machine and running in the background while you're doing the rest of your work.
Exactly.
Problem. Of course, and then you factored out also the scanner and then the printer is a part of that, right?
Right.
All right, Joel, on the PC, how do you know you've received a fax if you're using your board?
Okay, if I were here taping the show or I were at lunch and I came back and saw a little red fax indicator flashing in the lower right-hand corner of my screen, that tells me that I've received a new fax. I simply call up our software menu, go to Receive Faxes, and here I have a list of faxes that have come in. So I've highlighted the one that I want. I hit a function key to display it. And as long as I have any graphic screen, I can look at it without printing it out.
And approximately how much space does it take on the disk for each fax image?
Depending on what's on the page, a good rule of thumb is 10 to 20 K per page, and a real torture test page might be 100 K. Now that's a little bit hard to read. That's sort of an overview of the page. I can zoom in a level to see the full width on it. And here I can see it's about the fax board marketplace, which tells me that it's important, so I'd probably print this out instead of just throwing it away.
Okay.
And the Complete Fax comes with this software?
Absolutely.
Now what about creating faxes?
Okay, that of course is the other half of what people want to do, sending and receiving. And the way in which people want to send is from other applications, word processors or spreadsheets. So I'm going to call up Microsoft Word, and let's see if I can type.
No, you can't.
No,
Joel.
I can't type. Oh,
try it again.
I was trying to save myself the embarrassment of typing on the air. So let's load in a file that I created, and here's a letter to the Computer Chronicles. And all I have to do to send this is with a hotkey pop up a window that looks like a fax cover sheet, which is something that fax users are used to. Here I can fill in to whom it goes, enter the phone number, nice generic phone number, and away I go. Now what our software will do, when I tell the application to print, it will capture it to disk, and any text or graphics commands will be interpreted properly. So boldface, underline, italics, or graphic images will be correctly interpreted. When I eventually leave and go back to DOS, it will convert it and send it while I go on to use other applications.
Okay, and then you must provide various interfaces for various kinds of word processors then.
Actually, our hotkey works with just about any application you can use under MS-DOS.
So the software's sitting there RAM resident the whole time?
Exactly.
You can pop it up out of an application?
Right, using the hotkey.
Okay, Joyce, now we took a look at a standard kind of card that we're used to putting inside a PC. The JT Fax is a little bit different. Tell us about it.
Right, our JT Fax Portable is a small portable unit. It connects to the serial port of your PC, so that this unit can run on any PC that has a serial port and runs MS-DOS.
Or a laptop that doesn't have a slot.
Correct. In fact, it's ideal for that. And many of our customers use the ease of use as far as connecting and disconnecting this for their trips and their office work also.
Can we get a demo of this?
Sure.
The JT Fax?
Of course. What I'll do is I'll show how a file can be sent from an application. In this case, it'll be WordPerfect. What I'm going to do is retrieve my document.
I might explain, Joyce, you're working off a real laptop, but for our viewers' purposes, we've plugged the output into a regular CRT.
Right. This is the document that I will be sending. If you'll notice on the top left-hand corner, we have an ink file, and that is an embedded command used by the JT Fax, which calls up another file. In this case, this is the Quadram letterhead. Now in order to run our application capture, we first have to activate the JT Fax menu. And as you can see, what I did was I hotkeyed in order to bring that up. We want to transmit a fax via application. We want to enter the telephone number, in this case, just anything, and transmit immediately. The next step in application capture is to capture the file that you would normally send to a printer, and it will be sent out as a fax. And in this case, what we'll do is we'll select the printer, which, as you see here, is JT Fax by Quadram, which is included on the WordPerfect diskette. And we want to print the full page. Now,
so in this case, now it's just acting as if it's a printer and printing the fax.
That's correct.
Yeah. You're printing out a WordPerfect document in the same way you normally would.
Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. So if you're familiar at all with your word processor, you know how to do that.
Okay.
The next thing you'll see, and I think we just missed it, a little message came on the screen saying that application capture is in progress.
I see.
What that
Right,
means,
we see it.
and now it's being transmitted. The file's being transmitted.
And we can hear it,
And there's the
actually.
noises you hear,
Okay.
correct. And that will be received over at the fax station.
Okay, so you're shipping it to that fax machine over there right now?
That's correct.
Okay.
Now, can JT Fax also work as a background program?
Our
Can you do
JT
work while you're running?
Our JT Fax Portable works in the foreground, as you see. However, our high-end products do operate in the background. Our JT Fax 9600 operates in the background.
And how long does it take then to send a page? Typically, we're hearing it beep along.
Probably about a minute.
Uh-huh.
And that will be printed out as it's received.
While we're waiting for that, what about the logo business? You mentioned letterhead and so on. How do you
Right.
handle that if you don't have a scanner?
Well, that's handled through the JT Fax software. We have the ability to display a received fax and take a portion of that received fax out and rename it as far as a new file name. That way, if someone sends me a copy of my letterhead, I can display it on my JT Fax, cut out the letterhead, and then that will be a permanent file that I can use
And
later.
you can do this for the signature portion as well, I
That's
guess.
correct. In fact, anything that you receive on the JT Fax, you can cut out portions of text or graphics.
Now, what about conversions into programs that like to use the graphics?
Okay.
Let's say you're working in a word processor and you receive the fax and you like to cut out pictures and things of that sort. What sort of operations is your...
Well, that's fairly limited. As far as taking a received fax and putting it into your word processor, that's pretty much covered by OCR, optical character
Well, I'm
recognition.
thinking just of the graphic portion
just the
itself,
graphic portion?
yeah.
That's entirely possible,
Yeah.
yes.
Is that also true for complete fax?
Absolutely. We support PC Paintbrush, Dr. Halo, Microsoft Windows Paint, and TIFF files. So virtually any desktop publishing or graphics program could use a received fax as an image.
Joel, what kind of price range are we talking now for your board?
Okay, the board that I held up earlier, the Complete Fax, which is a 4800 bit per second board, runs in full background, is $399 retail. We also have a higher performance board, the Complete Fax 9600, runs in background for $699 retail. And finally, our top of the line is known as the Complete Communicator. It combines fax, voicemail, and a modem on one board for $899.
And Joyce, what about JT Fax?
Well, on our low end, we have our half card, called our JT Fax 4800 internal. That retails for $295. So really at a street price of probably under $200, someone can have fax capabilities. The JT Fax Portable that you see here retails for $495. We also have a card for PS2 machines, as well as our JT Fax 9600, and that retails for $795, and it includes a 1200 baud Hayes modem.
Joyce, Joel, thank you very much. Now, if you have a laptop and if you have a JT Fax, you can send a fax from anywhere, but suppose you don't have those with you, there's still a way you can send faxes these days. It's called a pay fax phone, and Wendy Woods has the report.
There you are in a hotel. You've got a document that absolutely positively has to be there. Not overnight, but now. What you need is a fax machine. But where do you find one? Increasingly, they're being found in the hotel. This is called a pay fax terminal. Give it your credit card, follow a few simple instructions, and insert your document, much as one would into a photocopier. Within a few seconds, the document has been scanned and stored in memory. Then it's time to punch in the phone number to which the fax should be sent. Faxes can also be received this way. And the PayFax terminal includes a phone with which you can make voice calls. Fax Plus has set up some 600 of these machines in 25 metropolitan areas in the first 3 months of installation.
For the individual in a hotel, they're totally reliant on the hotel in terms of a fax machine behind a front desk, whether or not the fax machine is available according to the hotel schedule, and they certainly lose their confidentiality in the process. Here's an opportunity for an individual to use their credit card, go up to the machine, send or receive a fax on their own schedule, very economically and confidentially.
The cost for this session? $8 plus local phone company charges, a bill of $9. In Redwood Shores, California, for the Computer Chronicles, I'm Wendy Woods.
Joining us in the studio now is Steve Cheifet. Steve is product manager with Xerox Imaging Systems, and they make the data copy microfax. Next to Steve is Nick Baran, senior technical editor with Byte magazine. Gary?
Nick, we see that there's a wide range of boards available for PCs and I suppose other computer systems. What kind of price ranges are we talking about in general?
Well, the range is from about $300 up to around $1,000.
And what are the differences you find?
The main difference is performance. The more expensive boards all operate at 9,600 bits per second, whereas the cheaper ones are often 4,800. Another interesting feature of the more expensive ones, they usually have peer-to-peer communications between boards on different machines at different locations at 9,600 bits per second.
And when you're talking about peer-to-peer, you mean like pure binary?
Yes.
In the case instead of raster?
Right, and they're just blasting the file over at 9,600.
Right, okay. Now I think Steve's product is one actually that has both modes, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
Can you tell me a little bit about, first of all, the product you have?
Okay, well, the data copy microfax board, we began manufacturing the board about 2 years ago. We were one of the first 2 or 3 companies involved in the PC facsimile market. The board we have 2 boards, one for the standard PC AT bus, as well as one for the microchannel machine, which we're demonstrating here. The price on both boards is $695.
Okay.
As was mentioned earlier, it is a 9600 baud background operating device.
Okay. Now you have a demonstration that's going to show both of these modes.
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay.
Real quick, all we do is type fax to get into the facsimile program. As this is booting up, one of the interesting characteristics of data copy's background program is a lot of foreground applications take up a great deal of memory. So whenever you're running in background, you want to try and minimize the amount of memory that you're taking up. The microfax background program takes up exactly 4K of memory. So it's very, very, very small.
How do you manage that?
Just the way that we move data, we try not to do too much in memory. Everything we do is on the card and on disk.
Okay.
So what we'll do is we work basically on a pull-down menu system. Just simply go to the call menu, go into your telephone book, point at those that you want to call. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to place 2 calls. I'm going to place one to the fax machine here in the studio, and then one to a microfax card that's sitting in my machine at data copy. And what I'll do is I will take a text file, which is nothing more than a small cover sheet that I have here, and I will select it to be transmitted. What the machine will do is it will take the file for the fax machine, convert that to raster facsimile format, send it to the fax machine, retain the binary nature of the file for the one going to the microfax in Mountain View.
Okay.
Scheduling capability, which is pretty common amongst fax boards. Now what it will do is it'll go in and will convert the file for the fax machine. That conversion process for a full page generally takes between 10 and 20 seconds, dependent upon the amount of information on the page.
As this is being done here, are there any emerging standards as far as the mode of binary transfer?
Yeah. Earlier it was mentioned that it's a peer-to-peer or a card microfax to microfax in this case. One of the things that's currently ongoing is that all of the fax board manufacturers are getting together in an effort to standardize the protocol that's used, such that when we emerge with this standard, ultimately all fax boards will be able to communicate in a binary fashion with all other fax boards.
Which you can't do right now.
Which means, in essence, what we'll be able to do now is perform high-speed modem functions between PC fax boards.
Right.
So what's happening right now?
Okay, right now we're transmitting off to the fax machine behind us.
And we see it coming out of the fax machine.
And you can see it coming out. We are in background, which means I could escape here. Up in the upper right-hand corner, you notice that we give you a status indicator of what's going on. Once this call is completed, it will turn around, make the second call to the microfax in Mountain View, and send the binary file to the microfax there.
What about graphics in the binary mode? Now, are we going to be talking about standards and emerging just for text transfer or for graphics as well?
No, again, it is a binary standard, so it really doesn't matter what's in the file.
Okay.
The advantages of transmitting graphics via a binary file type of a format versus a fax format is that entire transmission is error corrected.
Okay, Steve, I interrupt you. We're out of time here. Nick, you're going to be back with us in just a second. And in just a moment, we'll take a look at Intel's connection coprocessor, so stay with us. Joining us in the studio now is Rich Bader. Rich is General Manager of the PC Enhancement Operation at Intel, and back with us, Byte Magazine's Nick Baran. Nick, before we get going with the Intel Connection coprocessor, I think fewer than 1% of the people using fax machines are using boards, so they don't seem to have made a big dent in the market yet. Why is that? Are there problems?
Well, I think there's still some limitations with the current fax boards on the market. One of them is the fact that it's pretty difficult to view the image on the screen. Oftentimes the graphics image is too large to fit on the screen at one time, and if you do, it shrinks too much, hard to see. And so you're forced to print it every time, and unless you have a really good quality printer, they're also pretty hard to read. On a dot
you really need a laser printer to
I think you do,
use a
yeah.
fax board?
On a dot matrix printer, they're very hard to read. I mean, you can read it, but not really that acceptable. I think they're actually very good for people who are self-employed or in a remote site, so they really have access to hard copy from offices and other locations. But the other problem is, of course, a lot of offices already have fax machines, and so there's not that much of a motivation to go out and buy a fax board.
They seem to be pretty good as used as outgoing message devices. And sending messages out, that's a good use for them in a small computer system.
Yeah, and I've found it, when I work at home and I have a fax board installed, it really is very helpful to get some paperwork from the office, just have it sent over. It's really very good. So.
Rich, you've got a high-end board here which does a lot. Tell us how it's different really from what we've seen before.
Well, the connection coprocessor is a communications coprocessor that provides very simple fax and file transfer in the background, and it really assembles the best of all the features of the boards that you've already had on your show and combines them in one package. But I think that one of the things that's best about our product is how easy it is to use, especially when transmitting faxes or file transfer.
Show us.
As an example, what we have here is an application that's familiar to many people, Lotus 123, and with our Intel DCA communication application spec and some extra code, we've converted this program, a spreadsheet program, into a communicating program. I now have extra commands that I've added to 123 that allow me to send the spreadsheet as a fax or as a file transfer to other connection coprocessors.
So you're not calling up a background program, you're running it out of the application?
This portion, the human interface, is in the application, but all of the file conversion and actual file transfer will be done in the background. I can show you that.
Okay.
It's so simple, all I need to do is answer 4 questions. What file do I want to send? Who do I want to send it to? How do I want to send it? And when do I want it sent? Here I'll select 2. We want to send it to the Computer Chronicles, and we select that information from our phone book. We then select File. Which file do we want to send? The current worksheet, and just like printing, I've selected a range of the file to be sent. I then can answer when do I want it sent. I'll send it immediately. How do I want it sent? I'll send it as a fax. Now I type G for go, and it's off and going. And now I can quit this extra piece of my program, and now I'm back in Lotus 123, and I can be recalculating.
So the coprocessor at this point is taken over and is building the images and so forth.
Exactly, and off it goes.
Can you tell just briefly a little bit about the standard you were talking about?
Yes, the Intel DCA Communications Application Spec, or CAS, is a programming interface that allows software developers to add communications capability to their processing applications, making it very easy for people to learn how to do communicating. You don't have to learn a whole new program to do it.
Nick, one last question. Can anybody buy a fax board no matter what PC, no matter what hardware configuration you have, or is there some minimum you need?
Well, for most of them, you actually need at least 512K, and more often 640, and you definitely need a graphics board and a graphics monitor, preferably EGA in PC world, so that's certainly a limitation.
And also some hard disk space, right?
Yeah, you need some, that's right. In fact, you need a lot of hard disk space.
That's a huge file, a fax file.
Yeah, in fact, I had recently a 7-page document came over, took up almost 2 megabytes with a lot of graphics.
Okay. Rich, Nick, thank you very much. That's our look at fax boards. We'll be back in just a minute with this week's Computer News. In the random access file this week, Intel says the new 8486 chip will be unveiled within 2 months. It reportedly contains 1 million transistors, uses RISC architecture, and is object code compatible with the 386 chip. MIT's X-Window windowing system seems to be the new standard for Unix developers. Virtually every Unix company except for Next has now endorsed X-Window. InfoWorld magazine has released the results of its annual reader survey to name the most important new hardware and software products of the year. The winners were the IBM PS2 Model 70 and the Compaq 38625 for hardware. The best two software packages were WordPerfect 5.0 for the PC and Microsoft's Excel 1.5 for the Macintosh. With just 1 month to go before the IRS tax deadline, it's time to get serious if you're thinking about buying a tax preparation program. There are several good ones on the market. Among them, TurboTax. Its strong points are its powerful formula calculations for complex things like depreciation. It features online context-sensitive IRS instructions, a visual representation of an actual 1040 form on the screen, and an auto-interview mode, which helps you decide which forms you need. It also supports 41 state returns, and it can print out IRS-approved 1040s and schedules. Ask Dan is the new kid on the block in tax preparation software, and as its name suggests, its best feature is its online help. It has extensive tax expertise built into the program. It's relatively easy to use and packed full of features, including an auditor function that checks your return for missing entries and can even suggest possible deductions. Another popular tax package for PC compatibles is J.K. Lasser's Your Income Tax. It's a basic tax preparation program, but it does let you compare two versions of your return side by side to see which strategy works best. It also interfaces with Quicken, the popular personal finance software program. If you only need the basics, a good budget package is the Tax Advantage. It's out in an enhanced version this year, supporting more forms. It will import data from dollars and cents and several other personal finance programs. If you're a Mac user, the obvious choice is probably Macintax. It features a graphic representation of the 1040 and 73 other tax forms on screen. It automatically links all forms and cells like one big spreadsheet, and it prints out beautiful IRS-acceptable tax forms and schedules. And there's now a PC version of Macintax called TaxView. A good low-cost approach on the Macintosh is Tax Stacks. It's a HyperCard approach to doing your taxes. It comes complete with HyperCard and 30 forms and schedules, a tax questionnaire, IRS instructions, and a file called Tax Jokes. Finally, there was the expected snafu at the IRS last week as 450,000 refund checks were delayed after a sorting error necessitated the recalculation of 1.7 million returns. But says the IRS it was not a computer problem, just good old-fashioned human error. That's it for this week's Random Access. We'll see you next time.
The Computer Chronicles is made possible in part by McGraw-Hill, publishers of Byte Magazine, and Bix, the Byte Information Exchange. In print and online, Byte and Bix serve computer professionals worldwide with detailed information on new hardware, software, and technologies.
For a transcript of this week's Computer Chronicles, send $4 to PTV Publications, Post Office Box 701, Kent, Ohio 44240. Please indicate program date.